The call came in at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of a 74 million wire transfer when my iPhone lit up on the rosewood desk in my corner office on the 32nd floor of 540 West Madison, downtown Chicago. The number wasn't in my contacts. 847 area code. North Shore. The kind of number that belongs to people who live in houses with names. I almost let it go to voicemail. Wire transfers don't pause themselves, and the seller on the other end of this one was a man in his 70s who had spent the last 6 weeks arguing about escrow. But something made me pick up. I still don't know what. Instinct, maybe. Or the same instinct that wakes you up 4 seconds before the phone rings. The phone vibrated against the desk twice. 3 times. A 4th. Is this Mr. Holden? Daniel Holden? A man's voice. Mid-50s, maybe. Soft. Not the voice of someone selling me something. The voice of someone who had been standing in a room and realized he didn't know whose house he was standing in. Who's asking? I said. My name is Arthur Penbrook. I purchased the property at 1422, Forest Avenue in Winnetka. Closed yesterday. I just want to make sure you're okay. My attorney told me after I signed the papers that you are still listed as a co-owner on the title. That the sale was filed in error. That your signature on the deed was forged. He paused. There was a long breath on the line, the kind of breath a man takes when he knows he is about to change someone else's life and he is trying to be careful about it. Are you okay, Mr. Holden? I sat very still in my chair. Outside my window the Chicago River was doing what it always does in October, catching the light off the towers and throwing it back at anyone who bothered to look up. The seller on the other end of my wire was asking me to confirm a routing number. I didn't hear him. I heard Arthur Penbrook in Winnetka standing in what used to be my dining room, looking at the coved ceiling my grandfather had restored in 1962, and asking me if I was okay. No, I said. I'm not okay. But thank you for calling. I ended the call. I stood up. I walked to the window. And for the first time in 12 years of doing this job, I did not sit back down. I called my driver, a man named Carl who has driven me for 9 years and who knows by now that when I call from the office and not from the car, something has happened. I told him to bring the car to the Madison Street entrance. I told my assistant, Marta, to clear my afternoon. She didn't ask why. Marta has worked for me for 9 years. She knows the difference between a meeting that needs rescheduling and a day that needs clearing. On the way down in the elevator, I sent one text. To my wife, Camille. 3 words. Call me back. She didn't. The elevator had that music again. The kind of music that office buildings play to convince themselves they are still civil. I've listened to that same song for 6 years, every morning, and I have never learned the name of it. I have only learned that I am supposed to pretend not to hear it. The elevator took 43 seconds to go from the 32nd floor to the lobby. 43 seconds. I counted them. I have never counted an elevator before. I have never had a reason to count an elevator before. I have, occasionally, in moments I would rather not name, counted a great many things, the number of times I have said the word later to Camille estimated at 460, the number of times I have read in front of her estimated at 3,000, the number of times I have eaten a meal at the kitchen table without looking up estimated at 9,000. The number of times I have not asked her what she wanted estimated at 1. I am telling you this now because I want you to understand that I have done the math. I have done the math on a Thursday night, in February, in the apartment on Lake Shore Drive, with a glass of water and a copy of the closing documents, and the math said what I always knew it would say, which is that I am not a bad man. I am a quiet man. And quiet, as Joan has told me, is just avoidance with a better vocabulary. I stepped out of the elevator. The lobby had the same lighting it always has, which is to say it pretended to be brighter than it was. The security guard nodded at me. His name is Marcus. He has been the security guard at 540 West Madison for 16 years. I have never learned his wife's name. I have never learned the name of his youngest daughter. I have never learned what he does on Saturdays. He has never asked me any of those things about myself. This is, I have come to understand, the architecture of modern American male friendship, two men who see each other 5 days a week and know nothing about each other, and who nod. I nodded. He nodded. We were two men who knew nothing about each other, nodding. The car was waiting. Carl was holding the door. Carl did not say anything. Carl did not need to say anything. Carl had been with me for 9 years, and Carl had learned, the way all good drivers learn, that the silence of a passenger is the loudest thing in the vehicle. I'm Daniel Holden. 43 years old. I run a boutique investment firm that specializes in legacy industrial assets, the kind of deals that don't show up on CNBC because they're too quiet, too slow, and they don't photograph well. I bought my first building when I was 26, an old textile mill in Rockford, Illinois, that everyone except me was convinced was a money pit. The mill had been in receivership twice. It had been vandalized twice. It had been foreclosed on once and the bank that foreclosed had tried to give it away. No one took it. The town wasn't sure what to do with it because the building was too big to tear down and too broken to use, and the zoning was wrong for anything except the use it had already been used for, which was making textiles, which Rockford didn't make anymore. I took it. I bought it for $800,000, of which $600 was borrowed from a small bank in Belvedere run by a man named Henry Laskowski, who had known my grandfather and who had, at my grandfather's funeral in 1998, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Danny, when you are ready, come see me." I came to see him 14 years later. He was 81 years old when he signed the loan. He died 8 months after that. His daughter, who now runs the bank, calls me once a year on the anniversary of his death to wish me a good year. I always ask her how the bank is doing. She always tells me. I always send flowers to Henry's grave in the spring. 14 years later that mill is worth 9 times what I paid for it, and the people who said I was wrong now return my calls on the first ring. The mill is a paper packaging facility now, leased to a Wisconsin company that makes the kind of corrugated boxes Amazon ships its smaller parcels in. The press releases don't mention my name. The ribbon-cutting photos don't mention my name. The buildings still have my name on the deed. That is enough. I married Camille when I was 31. She was 28. We met at a fundraiser at the Art Institute, one of those black-tie evenings where the women wear borrowed jewels and the men sell each other their own companies. She was running the silent auction table. I was buying a print I didn't need just so I could talk to her for 10 minutes without looking like I was hitting on the help. She was smart. Sharper than me, honestly, in the way she moved through a room. She could read a person's balance sheet in the first 30 seconds the way most people read a face. By the end of that night I knew 2 things. I was going to marry this woman. And I was going to have to keep up with her for the rest of my life. The wedding was small. 80 people. A barn outside Galena, Illinois, in late September. My father walked me down the aisle, and he leaned in close as I stepped up to the altar and said, "Son, you have just hired your new boss." I laughed. He wasn't laughing. My father had been right about a lot of things. He had been right about Camille. He had been right about the building in Rockford. He had been right about my brother, Michael, who is 2 years younger and who is, in my father's words, the best of us without the education. My father had been wrong about exactly 2 things. He had been wrong about the Yankees, who he said would never win another World Series, and he had been wrong about the North Shore, which he said I would never be able to afford, both of which I have now disproved. My father died in 2017. He died in his living room, in his armchair, watching the Cubs play the Indians in the World Series. He had watched every Cubs game since 1945. He had been to Wrigley once. He said it was too loud. He preferred to watch from home, where he could hear his own thoughts. The Cubs won that night. The nurse told me later that he had been awake for the last out and that his face had twitched in something she thought might have been a smile. I think about that a lot. I think about the fact that the last thing my father saw on this earth was a baseball going over a fence in Cleveland. I think about the fact that he didn't get to tell me about Camille, about the wire, about the house. I think about the fact that, had he been alive on that Tuesday in October, he would have known what was happening before Arthur Penbrook's phone ever rang. He would have known because my father was the kind of man who could hear a marriage breaking up 4 rooms away. We bought 1422 Forest Avenue in 2014. It's not a mansion. Winnetka is full of mansions and ours was never one of them. But it was a house. A real house. 3 stories. 5 bedrooms. A wide front porch with the kind of swing you only see in places where people still wave at each other from across the street. The kitchen was the original 1908 kitchen, restored plank by the previous owner, who had been a contractor before he became an alcoholic before he died alone in a hospice in Evanston. When we bought the house I told Camille I wanted to keep the kitchen exactly as it was. She said, "Good. Don't touch it. Some things are already perfect." We put $312,000 into that house over the next 9 years. New roof. New mechanicals. A finished basement that I built with my own hands during the winter of 2018 because Camille said she wanted a place where the kids could sled indoors when it was too cold to go out. We never had kids. She said she wanted them. I said I wanted them. We both said it enough that we eventually stopped saying it, and the basement became a place where I went to be alone when the rest of the house got too quiet. The sleds were never used. They are still in the corner of the basement under a tarp. They are red. They were a gift from my mother our first Christmas in the house. She sent them in the mail with a note that said, "For the grandchildren that will come." She died in 2021. She died without ever meeting her grandchildren. She died without ever asking me about Camille, which was her way of telling me she already knew. The address meant something to me. 1422, Forest Avenue. The same street my grandfather lived on when he came back from the war in 1946 and bought a 2-flat with the bonus money he'd saved in a sock on a submarine. He used to walk me to the bakery on the corner when I was 6. He used to buy me a glazed donut and a small carton of milk, and he used to let me sit on the stool by the window and watch the street while he talked to the baker about things I didn't understand. The baker's name was Mr. Pappas. Mr. Pappas had a daughter, Athena, who is now 68 and who still lives in Winnetka, in a house 2 blocks from ours. She attended my grandfather's funeral. She attended my mother's funeral. She has never attended anything of mine. I have always wanted to invite her to something of mine. I have never known what. I bought the house on Forest Avenue because I wanted my children to walk to that bakery. They never existed. The bakery closed in 2019. But the house was still there, and every time I drove up the driveway I could hear my grandfather's voice saying, "Slow down at the bump, Danny. You'll rattle your grandmother's teeth." My grandmother had died in 1986, 3 years before I was born, but my grandfather talked about her as if she had died a week ago. He talked about her the way a man talks about a woman he never got over. The way a man talks about a woman he stitched into the lining of his coat and carried with him every morning without ever telling anyone. Camille and I had a good marriage. Or I thought we did. We didn't fight. We rarely raised our voices. We had separate friends, separate hobbies, and a quiet understanding that the house was the one place where all of that stopped mattering. Sunday mornings we made coffee in the restored kitchen and read the paper in silence. On her birthday I left a small box on her pillow, never wrapped, because Camille said wrapping paper was a waste of a tree. On mine she always sent a card with one line in her slanted handwriting, "Still choosing you." Still. I believed her. I believed her because there was nothing in our life that told me not to. The bills were paid. The calendar was full. We hosted Thanksgiving for her sister and her sister's husband and their 2 kids, who had decided years ago that Aunt Camille was the fun one and Uncle Daniel was the one who let you have a second glass of wine if you asked politely. We flew to Lisbon in April. We drove to Maine in August. We danced in the kitchen on weeknights when a song came on the radio and neither of us wanted to admit we'd heard it. This is the thing about being betrayed by someone who is good at it. There are no signals. There are no fights. There is no moment where the temperature in the room changes. There is only a Tuesday morning and a phone call from a man in Winnetka and the realization that the woman you've been sleeping next to for 12 years has been quietly emptying the house you built your life inside. The fight, if you want to call it that, was about a reading lamp. It was in 2017. She wanted to replace the lamp in her office. I said I liked the lamp. She said the lamp didn't work. I said it did work. She said it didn't. I said, it works, Camille, it works fine, you just don't like the height of it. She said, Daniel, the lamp doesn't work and you never listen to me. I said, okay, we'll get a new lamp. She said, I don't want a new lamp. I want you to listen when I tell you that a lamp doesn't work. I bought her a new lamp. I didn't argue. I installed it myself. I did not say anything mean about the old lamp. I did not point out that the old lamp still works in the guest room where it is now. I did not point out that she never asked about the old lamp again. I did not point out that she never asked about anything I was doing in the house, including the basement, including the new storm windows, including the rebuilt porch swing she had wanted since 2015. The reading lamp fight never made it onto the list. The list was the thing we made later, in therapy. We went to therapy twice. Once in 2019, after the empty nest discussion that wasn't. Once in 2022, after the trip to Lisbon where she told me, on the third night, that she had begun to feel like a tourist in her own marriage. The therapist was a man named Dr. Fian. He was gentle. He made notes on a yellow pad. He asked Camille what she wanted. She told him she wanted more of me. He asked me what I wanted. I told him I wanted her to be happy. He wrote something down. He underlined it. I do not know what he underlined. I do not think he knew what he underlined. The list had 40 items on it. The list was supposed to be the things we would do together in the next 12 months. Things that would rebuild the connection. Things that would make us feel like we were a couple again, not just two people who happen to live in the same house and share the same credit card. The list had items like cook dinner together on Wednesdays and go for a walk after dinner instead of checking email and read aloud to each other once a week. We did not get through the list in 2019. We did not get through the list in 2020 because of the pandemic. We did not get through the list in 2021 because of my mother's death. We did not get through the list in 2022 because Dr. Fian moved his practice to Portland. He sent us a card in the mail. He wished us well. He did not return the $240 we had prepaid for the December session. We did not get through the list. We did not get through the list. We did not get through the list. Arthur Penbrook was polite. He was almost too polite. The kind of polite that meant he had talked to his own attorney and his attorney had told him to be polite, because if the deed was forged the sale was void, and if the sale was void then Arthur Penbrook had just paid $3.2 million for a house he did not own. He sent me the documentation that night. The listing agreement. The purchase contract. The closing disclosure. The HUD-1 settlement statement. All of it signed by Camille Holden as sole seller. All of it under our family trust without my signature. All of it notarized by a man named Roy Calderon who works out of a strip mall in Skokie and who notarizes, I would later find out, more documents a week than most notaries sign in a year. Roy Calderon was, in his own words, a one-man express line. He did not know whose signature he was notarizing. He did not ask. He did not check ID. He charged $40 a signature and he processed 8 signatures for Camille in 2 sittings in March of this year, which I would later learn was the month the Helic closed and the Lisbon lease was first scouted. I sat at the kitchen table in our apartment on Lakeshore Drive, the apartment I moved into in March so I could be closer to the office while the Winnetka renovation was happening, and I read every page. Twice. 3 times. The house had been listed on a Friday in August. Open houses on Saturday and Sunday. Offers due Monday. Camille accepted an offer Tuesday. Inspection Wednesday. Title open Thursday. Closed 31 days later. The whole thing was done in 5 weeks. In real estate in Winnetka, that is moving at the speed of a man running from something. Most houses in Winnetka take 8 to 12 months to sell. Most houses in Winnetka have multiple offers. Most houses in Winnetka go through 3 price reductions before the seller accepts. Our house had none of those things. Our house had 1 offer in 1 weekend and a closing in 1 month. I didn't eat that night. I would like to tell you I made a sandwich. I would like to tell you I poured myself a drink. I would like to tell you I called someone. I did none of those things. I sat at the kitchen table in the apartment on Lakeshore Drive, with the documents spread around me like the airline tickets for a flight I didn't know my wife was taking, and I read the closing documents 4 times and I said nothing. I said nothing because there was no one to say anything to. The apartment was empty. Camille had been in the apartment that morning. She had left at 8:40. She had said she was going to a doctor's appointment. She had said the doctor was a new gynecologist she had been wanting to see for a while. She had said the office was in Evanston. She had said she would be home by 11. She was not home by 11. She was not home at all. The buyer was Arthur Penbrook. Retired. 61. Self-made. He'd sold his HVAC company in 2019 and moved into the area to be near his grandchildren. He had not been told that there was a co-owner. He had not been told there were photographs on the mantle, wedding photos, family photos, photos of me, photos of us, photos that should have made any reasonable person ask, where is he? But Arthur Penbrook is the kind of man who buys houses to live in them, not to inspect them, and when he walked through 1422, Forest Avenue the weekend before closing, he saw crown molding and original woodwork in a backyard with a swing, and he didn't ask about the missing person in the photographs on the mantle. Because that is what the photographs were missing me from. Camille had staged them. She had taken me out of every frame. She had not, however, taken me out of every photograph in the house. She had not taken me out of the wedding photo in the upstairs hallway, which I had framed in the month we moved in. She had not taken me out of the photo of the 2 of us on the front porch of the Galena barn, which hangs next to the front door. She had not taken me out of the photo of me on the day the textile mill closed its first deal, which sits on the desk in what we called my office, which was, in reality, the 2nd bedroom on the 3rd floor. The fact that she had not removed me from those photographs told me 2 things. The first is that she had staged the photographs in the public rooms, not the private rooms, because she was showing the house to a buyer and she wanted the buyer to imagine themselves living in a house without a husband in the pictures. The second is that she had left me in the private photographs because she had not yet fully decided to leave, or because she did not think I would look. I looked. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Camille. I didn't call my brother Michael, who is the kind of brother who would drive to Winnetka in under an hour and stand in the driveway until someone explained himself. Michael has always been the kind of brother who shows up. He showed up to my wedding without being invited. He was on the list, but it was a different list, the list of people who would set up the chairs in the morning, and he spent the whole morning setting up chairs and he didn't say a word to me until the reception, when he pulled me aside and said, "Danny, she is too good for you." I said, "I know." He said, "Good. Don't tell her. She'll figure it out." He showed up to my mother's funeral and carried her casket with me and the funeral director and one of my mother's cousins, and he did not break down until he got back to the car, and then he broke down for 45 minutes in the parking lot of the church, and he didn't say a word, he just cried, and I didn't say a word, I just held his hand. Michael is the kind of brother who would have driven to Winnetka that Tuesday and stood in the driveway until something happened. But Michael also has 3 kids under the age of 8, and his wife Erin, who is a saint and who has been a saint for as long as I have known her, was 8 months pregnant with their third at the time, and I did not want to put him in the middle of this. Not yet. Not until I knew what this was. I called my attorney, Joan Holloway. Joan is 68. She has silver hair cut short and a voice that sounds like a closing argument. She has been my attorney since I bought the textile mill in Rockford, and she has never once told me what I wanted to hear. Joan, I said. I need you in my office in 20 minutes. Daniel, what's wrong? Someone sold my house. They used my forged signature. The buyer just called me to ask if I was okay. Silence. The kind of silence Joan only gives when she is recalculating everything she knows about me. 20 minutes, she said. And Daniel, don't sign anything. Don't send any emails. Don't text Camille. Do not move money between any accounts until I've seen the trust documents. I won't. Daniel. Yes. Are you alone? Yes. Are you safe? Yes. Then 20 minutes. I did what she said. I sat in my office. I drank a glass of water. I did not open the bottle of Macallan 25 in the credenza behind me, although I thought about it longer than I'm willing to admit. Joan arrived in 18 minutes. She read the closing documents. She pulled up the trust. She pulled up the property records on the Cook County Recorder's portal. She made one phone call to a title examiner she trusted. Then she closed her laptop and looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Daniel, she said. There is more. Tell me. There is a HELOC on the house. A home equity line of credit. Taken out in March of this year. Maximum draw of $1.8 million. Fully drawn. And there is a wire from the HELOC account to an account at Northern Trust in your wife's name alone. Opened in February. $500,000 a month for 4 months. $2 million total. She let that sit in the air for a moment. The air in my office smelled like the eucalyptus tree in the corner and the leather of the chair and the faint, almost imperceptible scent of the cigar I had promised my mother I would quit 3 years before she died. Daniel, that means that as of right now, your wife has moved approximately $5.2 million out of the marital estate in the last 9 months. 1.8 from the house. 2 from the bank. And the rest, the proceeds of the sale, she's going to receive on or before Friday. Where is the money going? I don't know yet. But I will know by tomorrow morning. I thanked her. I offered her a glass of water. She refused. She said, Daniel, when we are done with this, you can buy me dinner in Paris. Until then, neither of us is celebrating anything. She was right. I was not celebrating. I drove home that night. Not to Winnetka. The townhouse on Pearson. The place Camille and I bought as a city base when we renovated Forest Avenue in 2014. The place we kept when we moved to the Winnetka house full-time because neither of us could let go of the idea that someday we would live downtown again. The townhouse was supposed to be Camille's domain. She decorated it. She chose the wallpaper. She bought the art. She hosted her book club there twice a month. It was, in her words, the studio. The townhouse was on a street called Pearson, between Chicago and Mies van der Rohe. It was in a neighborhood called Streeterville, which is one of those Chicago neighborhoods that has no parks and no schools and nothing you can walk to except the hospital and the Trump Tower, but it has a view of the lake from every window and the people who live there have decided that those things are equal. The townhouse was 3 stories tall. It had a small garden in the back that Camille had planted herself, with herbs and a small maple and a row of lavender that smelled, in late June, like a promise she had made to herself. The garden had a bench. The bench was blue. Camille had painted the bench blue herself. The bench was the first thing she had ever painted. She had signed the bottom of it, in small black letters, CH 2014. She had not yet painted anything else. I let myself in. The door code still worked because Camille had not yet thought to change it. The hallway smelled like the same diptyque candle I had bought her 3 Christmases ago. The candle had been a gift. The candle had been called Figuier. The candle smelled like a tree in late August. The candle cost $90. I had bought it because Camille had once told me, in the 2nd year of our marriage, that she wanted to be the kind of woman who owned one expensive candle. I had thought she was joking. I had bought her the candle anyway. She had burned the candle. She had burned it down to a stub on the credenza in the hallway. She had replaced it with another one. She had replaced it with another one. She had replaced it with another one. She had not changed the door code. She was in the bedroom. Packing. Not the kind of packing you do when you are going on a trip. The kind of packing you do when you are leaving. 3 suitcases open on the bed. The cashmere I had given her for our 10th anniversary. The jewelry box. The passport. The framed photograph from Lisbon that she used to keep on the dresser but was now in a box at her feet. She looked up when I walked in. She did not look surprised. That was the first thing that told me everything I needed to know. She had been expecting me. Or she had been expecting someone. And in that moment, I realized, the someone she had been expecting was not me. She had been expecting me to be a different kind of man. A man who would scream. A man who would cry. A man who would throw something. A man who would do anything except look at her the way I was looking at her, which was a way I had not yet learned how to describe. "Daniel," she said. I said nothing. "You got the call," she said. "From Arthur." I said nothing. "Daniel, let me explain." "Don't. Daniel, please sit down. Let me tell you what happened." "There is nothing to explain. There is nothing that you can say that will change the fact that you sold my grandfather's house. There is nothing that you can say that will change the fact that you forged my signature. There is nothing that you can say that will change the fact that you took my name off every photograph on that mantel before you showed the house to a stranger." She sat down on the edge of the bed. The suitcases open at her feet like a verdict waiting to be read. "Who is Arthur to you?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Who is Arthur to you, Camille?" "Arthur is the buyer. He is the man who bought the house. There is no Arthur. There is no one. There has been no one for years, Daniel. There has just been, the weight." "The weight of what?" "The weight of being Camille Holden. The weight of being the wife of Daniel Holden. The weight of writing Mrs. Daniel Holden on every form. The weight of being introduced as Daniel's wife at every dinner. The weight of building a life in a house you bought for your grandfather. The weight of never being asked what I wanted. So your answer to that was to take $5 million and leave. $5 million is half of what I gave this family. $5 million is half of what I earned in 10 years of being your hostess, your recruiter, your therapist, your shadow. I ran your life, Daniel. I read your contracts before your attorneys did. I picked your suits. I picked your friends. I picked the schools for the children we never had because I thought we should at least pretend we had a plan. And not once in 12 years, did you ever ask me what I wanted. What did you want, Camille? I wanted out. Then you should have asked for a divorce. I did. 18 months ago. You didn't hear me. I didn't hear you because you didn't say it. I said it. You were reading. You said, "We'll talk about this later." You've been saying later for 18 months, Daniel. There is no later. There is only now. I left the townhouse. I closed the door behind me. I stood in the hallway for a moment. I thought about Ibsen. I thought about my grandfather. I thought about the 1908 kitchen. I took the elevator down. I got into my car. I drove to the office. I sat in the dark on the 32nd floor and watched the city lights come on one by one, and I did not cry. I want to make that clear. I did not cry. I have nothing against crying. I just did not feel it. What I felt was something colder and more precise than sadness. It was the feeling of a man who has just realized that the life he thought he was living was not the life he was living at all. It was the feeling of a man who has just discovered that he was the supporting character in someone else's movie for the entire run. There is a name for that feeling in German. I think it is Sehnsucht. Or maybe it is something else. I don't speak German. But I know the word. A friend of mine in Munich said it to me once at a dinner party. It is the feeling of a man who has lived in someone else's house for so long that he has forgotten the layout of his own. Joan called me at 11 the next morning. She had found the rest of the money. $2.4 million had been moved through a series of shell accounts Camille had set up with a financial advisor in Aspen, a man named Henry Whitlock. Whitlock ran a private wealth firm that specialized in what they called transition planning for high-net-worth individuals leaving long marriages. Joan had done some quick research. Whitlock had helped at least 4 other Chicago wives move more than $15 million out of their family estates in the last 10 years. None of those wives had been prosecuted. None of those men had ever gone public. The pattern was the same. Quiet trust amendment. Quiet helic. Quiet listing. Quiet sale. Quiet transfer. Quiet exit. By the time the husband found out, the wife was already in Aspen. Or Sedona. Or Jackson Hole. Living in a house with a different view of the same mountains. Joan told me about another case. A man named Gregory Farron, who runs a commercial real estate firm in Naperville. Farron's wife of 22 years had moved $9 million out of his estate between 2018 and 2021, using a similar playbook. Same helic. Same Aspen advisor. Same quiet listing. Same quiet sale. The house in question, a colonial on a cul-de-sac in Hinsdale, sold in 6 weeks for $900,000 less than the comp suggested it should. Mr. Farron did not find out about the sale until the buyer called him in December 2021 to ask about the riding lawn mower that had been left in the shed. Mr. Farron had purchased the lawn mower himself. Mr. Farron had ridden the lawn mower himself. Mr. Farron had not sold the house. Mr. Farron did not go public. Mr. Farron told his wife he forgave her. Mr. Farron died in March 2023. He died of a heart attack, alone, in the new apartment he had rented after the divorce. His ex-wife sent flowers. The flowers were delivered to the wrong apartment. The widow, Mr. Farron's second wife, had to call the florist and have them rerouted. The flowers were yellow. The widow has never said why the flowers were yellow. I thought about Mr. Farron for a week. I thought about him every night. I thought about him when I was supposed to be reading. I thought about him when I was supposed to be cooking. I thought about him when I was supposed to be sleeping. I am telling you this now because I want you to understand that Mr. Farron was not a statistic. Mr. Farron was a man who liked to ride his lawn mower in the early morning, before the street started moving, and who had been told, by his wife of 22 years, that he was being left, and who had decided to forgive her, and who had then died alone of a heart attack 8 months later, in an apartment the size of his old closet. In Camille's case, the destination was Lisbon. She had booked a one-way on tap for October 12. The apartment she had rented was in Principe Real. 3 bedrooms. A garden. A view of the Tagus. €11,000 a month. Paid up for a year in advance. She was planning this, Daniel, Joan said. She was planning this in February. 5 months before she sold the house. She had a calendar. She had a budget. She had a man whose name I will not give you now because I need 3 more days to confirm who he is. Is he why she's leaving? I asked. He may be why she's leaving. He may be why she's leaving right now. He may simply be the man who's meeting her at the airport in Lisbon. He may simply be the man she has been planning her life around for the last 18 months. Is he someone I know? I don't think so, Daniel. Will he be a problem? He might be. Then make sure he knows that he will be a problem. I will not bore you with the legal mechanics of what came next. There is a reason attorneys charge what they charge, and the reason is that they are willing to do the things that you are not willing to do. Joan filed an emergency petition in Cook County Circuit Court on a Thursday. By Monday morning the sale of 1422 Forest Avenue was stayed pending a forensic review of the signature on the deed. The HELOC was frozen. The Northern Trust accounts were frozen. The Lisbon lease was reviewed by a Portuguese attorney who informed Camille, in writing, that she could not draw on the lease deposit because the funds could not be traced to a verified source. Her flight on tap had a hold placed on it by my brother's friend at the State Department. This was not something I asked for. This was something my brother offered me when I told him what was happening, and I did not say yes, and I did not say no, and by the next morning it was done. I did not tell Michael what was happening. I did not have to. Michael had known for years that something was wrong. Michael had known because Michael had a wife, Erin, who had known for years that something was wrong, and Erin had known because Erin and Camille had been close once, 10 years ago, when the kids were young and the four of us would go up to a lake house in Wisconsin together and pretend we were the kind of family that took vacations. Erin had stopped calling Camille in 2021. Erin had not told me why. Erin had not had to tell me why. I think Erin had felt, as the wives of quiet husbands often feel, that the only way to be loyal to the husband was to be honest to the wife, and the only way to be honest to the wife was to stop calling. Erin called me that Tuesday, the day Arthur Penbrook called me, before I had even gotten to the bottom of the elevator. She said, "Danny, is Camille there?" I said, "No, she's not, Erin." She said, "Danny, are you okay?" I said, "I am." She said, "Then come for dinner on Sunday." Don't ask why. We did not ask why. We came for dinner on Sunday. We ate lasagna. We drank beer. We held hands. We did not talk about Camille. We did not talk about the house. We did not talk about the wiring. We talked about Michael's new boat. We talked about the kids. We talked about whether the Bears would ever win another Super Bowl. It was the best Sunday I had had in a year. What I will tell you is what it felt like. It felt like nothing. I went to work. I took the wire transfer meeting I had been in the middle of on Tuesday morning and I closed the deal on Thursday afternoon. The seller was a man in his 70s named Carl Ermshire who had spent 48 years running a small steel fabrication business in Granite City, Illinois. We shook hands across the table. He looked at me and said, "You seem tired, son." I said, "Yes, sir. I am." He said, "Good. Tired is honest." Carl Ermshire signed the deed that afternoon and he walked out of the conference room and he walked to the elevator and he walked to the parking garage and he got into his car and he drove home. He did not call his wife. He did not check his phone. He did not do anything except drive. I know this because I watched him walk to the parking garage from my window. I watched his gray hair blow in the wind. I watched him open his car door. I watched him sit for a full 60 seconds before he turned the key. I have always wondered what Carl Ermshire thought about in those 60 seconds. I have wondered if he thought about the woman he had sold his business to. I have wondered if he thought about his wife of 48 years. I have wondered if he thought about the sailboat he had wanted to buy. I have wondered if he thought about anything at all. I have wondered if he thought about nothing. I have wondered because I sat in those same 60 seconds the Tuesday morning I got the call. I sat in my car in the parking garage of 540 West Madison for 60 seconds before I drove home. I did not sob. I did not pray. I did not call anyone. I sat in my car, in a parking garage, in downtown Chicago, in October, and I thought about the bakery on Forest Avenue that had closed in 2019, and I thought about the bench Camille had painted blue, and I thought about Mr. Papas's daughter Athena, who lives 2 blocks from my house and who has never attended anything of mine, and I thought about the empty sleds in the basement of a house I had just been told had been sold. I went home to the apartment on Lake Shore Drive. I sat in the dark. I drank a glass of water. I did not drink the Macallan. I called my mother. I told her Camille and I were separating. I told her I didn't want to talk about why. She said, "Daniel, are you safe?" I said, "I am." She said, "Then I'm not going to ask anything else. Come for dinner on Sunday." I called my brother. He said, "I want to kill her." I said, "I know. Don't." He said, "I want to kill the man in Lisbon." I said, "I know. Don't." He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want my grandfather's kitchen back." He laughed. He was the first person who had laughed around me in 3 days, and the sound was so unfamiliar that I wasn't sure at first that it was laughter. On Friday, Camille's attorney, a woman named Sarah Gold, called Joan. Sarah Gold is one of those attorneys you hire when you have done something you shouldn't have done and you want someone who has done it before. She is tall. She is blonde. She sits on the board of 3 charities and has never lost a case in 22 years. She is also the kind of attorney who will call you personally to negotiate a settlement because the alternative is to go to trial, and trial means the cameras come out, and cameras mean Camille's face on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, and that is not something any of us, Camille included, wanted. Sarah said, "Joan, my client wants to make this go away." Joan said, "Sarah, my client wants his kitchen back." Sarah said, "Your client's kitchen is in a house that is currently subject to a court order, and we both know the court order will not survive a motion to dismiss. The signature on the deed is not a forgery. It is a power of attorney that my client executed in 2019 and never revoked." There was a long pause on the line. Joan said, "Send me the power of attorney." Sarah said, "I will." And Daniel should know that his wife is not the villain in this story. His wife is a woman who has been invisible in her own marriage for 12 years, and who, when she finally asked for space, was told to wait. Joan said, "Sarah, I have known Daniel Holden for 14 years. I have drafted his contracts. I have held his hand through 2 recessions and 1 terrible investment in a battery manufacturer in Wisconsin. He is not the kind of man who tells his wife to wait. He is the kind of man who reads in front of her when she is trying to talk to him. That is the difference. He is not a villain. He is a man who was genuinely unaware that he had stopped listening. Please don't sell him as something else." Sarah said, "Joan, I'll send you the power of attorney. We will talk on Monday." The power of attorney was real. Camille had asked me to sign it in 2019. I had signed it without reading it because we were running to a flight to Lisbon and she had said, "It's just for the house. It makes it easier if I'm ever traveling and something needs to be signed at the title company." I had signed it. I had put it in the document drawer. I hadn't thought about it again in 7 years. What the power of attorney actually said, in the careful paragraphs Joan walked me through on Saturday morning, was that Camille was authorized to act on my behalf in any matter concerning real property held in the Holden Family Trust. Including sale. Including lease. Including refinance. Including theft. I sat in Joan's office and I read the document again. And then I read it again. And then I read it a 3rd time. I said, "Joan, I signed that." She said, "I know." I said, "Then I can't claim forgery." She said, "Correct. The forgery claim is dead. But the breach of fiduciary claim is alive. She did not act in good faith. She did not disclose the sale to me. She did not act in the interest of the family. She acted in pursuit of her own interest. And under Illinois law, that is a breach. The damages are substantial." I said, What does substantial mean? She said, it means we can get the house back. It means we can claw back the Helic. It means we can stop her at the airport if we need to. And it means you will get to keep your grandfather's kitchen. I said, then let's do it. I will not describe the next 6 weeks in detail. They were ugly. They are the kind of weeks when you discover, as I said earlier, that the life you thought you were living was not the life you were living at all. They are the kind of weeks when you open the mail and find 3 of your own photographs in a manila envelope because Camille has returned them, minus the frames, because the frames are part of the estate and the estate is in litigation now. I will tell you what happened. Camille did not go to Lisbon. The court issued an order that prevented her from transferring more than $50,000 out of any account in which she was a co-signatory. She fired Sarah Gold. She hired a new attorney. The new attorney said she was sorry. The new attorney said Camille was sorry. I said, Camille can be sorry to the court. She can be sorry to Joan. She is not sorry to me. Arthur Penbrook called me again in November. He had moved out of 1422, Forest Avenue at the court's instruction. He had rented a furnished apartment in Wilmette. He had called to tell me that he had kept the wreath. He said, Mr. Holden, the wreath on the front door. The one that says, welcome. I kept it. I thought you might want it back when this is over. I said, thank you, Arthur. He said, I have been in this house one night, Mr. Holden. One night. And in that one night I understood your wife. I understood why a woman would leave a man in a house like that. Not because of the house. Because of the man. Because of what the house means. Because of what it must feel like to live inside someone else's history. He paused. Your wife did not want to live inside your grandfather's house, Mr. Holden. She wanted to live inside her own. That is not a crime. That is a tragedy. I said, Arthur, thank you for the wreath. He said, I will leave it on the porch when I move my things out. We settled in December. Out of court. Privately. The terms are mine to know and not yours to hear, but I will tell you this. I got the house back. Camille got the Lisbon apartment. She moved in February. She is there now, according to Joan, who keeps an eye on these things because Joan is the kind of attorney who keeps an eye on things. She is alone. There is no man in Lisbon. There was only ever the idea of a man in Lisbon. The idea was enough to make her leave. The idea was enough to make her forge a new version of herself out of half a decade of quiet resentment and $5.2 million of someone else's money. The man in Aspen, Henry Whitlock, disappeared from the financial world in November. His firm closed. His clients got their files back. No charges were filed. There is never enough proof in these cases. There is never enough proof because the books are clean by the time the husband finds out. I asked Joan once, late at night in her office, with 2 glasses of Macallan 25 on her desk and the city lights out the window, Joan, did I do something wrong? She said, Daniel, you did not do something wrong. You did not do something right either. You did nothing. You did nothing for 12 years. You did nothing when your wife told you she was unhappy. You did nothing when she asked you to read to her. You did nothing when she asked you to hold her hand. You read in front of her. You worked in front of her. You built a house around her like a coffin and you called it a home. I said, that is a cruel way to put it. She said, it is the only way to put it. You were not a bad husband. You were a quiet husband. And quiet is the most dangerous kind of husband there is, because quiet lets the other person build the story alone. I sold the textile mill in Rockford in January. For 9 times what I paid for it. To a Swedish pension fund that wanted to add American industrial real estate to its portfolio. The closing was in Stockholm. I flew over for 2 days. I signed the papers in a conference room with a view of the water and a portrait of a 19th-century industrialist on the wall. I shook hands with a man named Lars Eriksson. He said, "Mr. Holden, this has been a pleasure." I said, "Thank you, Lars. It has been a long time coming." On the flight home, I read. For the first time in a long time. I read a novel. I read pages. Not deals. Not contracts. Not term sheets. Fictional pages. About a man who had done the thing I had done and the man who had decided to forgive the woman he had loved. I cried. On an airplane. Across the Atlantic. In seat 14A. The flight attendant offered me a tissue. I took it. I thanked her. I went back to reading. The flight was 12 hours. I read for 9 of them. I slept for 1 of them. I stared out the window for 2 of them. I am telling you this now because I want you to know that 10,000 meters above the Atlantic, in a seat that reclined 20 degrees less than I would have liked, I cried in a way I had not cried since my mother died. I cried because I had finally understood the novel I was reading. I cried because the man in the novel had done the thing I had done. I cried because the woman in the novel had left the way Camille had left. I cried because the man in the novel had decided to forgive, and the man in the novel was now sitting in a kitchen alone, and the man in the novel was now writing a letter to his wife, and the man in the novel had decided that the letter was for him and not for her, and I knew, with the certainty of a man who has just been told something he has always known, that the novel had been written for me. The author's name is Stefan Zweig. The novel is called Beware of Pity. I had been given the novel by the Swedish Pension Fund's head of communications, a woman named Annika, who had noticed the novel on my desk during the visit and who had said, "Mr. Holden, you should read this. It is about men who forgive women." I had laughed. I had said, "I am not that kind of man." Annika had said, "You will be." I moved back into 1422, Forest Avenue in March. Alone. The townhouse on Pearson is on the market. The Lake Shore apartment is sublet to a young couple from Evanston who are paying me less than they should, and I am not asking them for more because they have a daughter and I have decided that grace is a muscle and I am going to exercise it. The kitchen is still there. The 1908 kitchen. The kitchen my grandfather restored. The kitchen Camille said not to touch because some things are already perfect. I have not touched it. I have added nothing to it. I have removed nothing from it. I have taken the wreath from Arthur Penbrook and I have hung it on the front door and I have not taken it down. In the morning I make coffee in the same pot my grandmother used and I read the paper in silence and I do not pretend that someone is across the table from me. I just read. On Sundays I cook. I have learned to cook. Real cook. Roast chicken on a Sunday with the kind of potatoes my mother used to make and a salad I picked up from the farmer's market in Wilmette. I set the table for 1. I eat. I clear the table. I wash the dishes by hand. I do not use the dishwasher because the dishwasher is loud and I have discovered that I prefer quiet for the first time in my life. The first Sunday I cooked, I burned the chicken. I burned it because I was reading the recipe on my phone and the phone alarm did not go off and the chicken sat in the oven for an hour and 23 minutes instead of an hour. The smoke alarm went off at 4:47 p.m. The dog Arthur barked. The neighbor across the street, a woman named Patricia who has lived on Forest Avenue since 1982, came over to make sure I was okay. I told her I was fine. She told me she had called 911 once, when her husband had had a heart attack in 2014 and she had been told to wait outside for the ambulance, and that the ambulance had taken 11 minutes to arrive and that her husband had died on the driveway. I told her I was sorry. She told me not to apologize. She told me she had remarried in 2018, to a man named Roy who lived 2 doors down, and that Roy was also a widower, and that they had met at a support group for spouses of people who had died suddenly. I told her I was glad she had met Roy. She told me Roy was also glad she had met him. She told me she was glad I had moved back into the house. She told me Camille had been a nice woman but had sometimes seemed like a woman who was waiting for a train. I told her I did not know what that meant. She told me I would, eventually. I do not know yet what Patricia meant. I think about it every Sunday when I cook the chicken. I think about whether the train has arrived yet, and where it is going, and whether the woman on the platform is happy, and whether the woman on the platform has stopped waiting, and whether she has decided to build a different kind of platform, on a different kind of street, in a different kind of city, where the trains run on time and the schedule is honest and the conductor knows her name. I think about these things because I have decided, finally, in the kitchen on a Sunday, that the only sin a marriage can commit is to forget the other person's name. I think about these things because I have remembered my own name. I wrote Camille a letter in May. Not an email. A letter. On my grandfather's stationery. The kind of paper you can still buy at the museum shop on Michigan Avenue. 3 pages. I told her that I forgave her. I told her that I did not forgive her because she deserved forgiveness. I told her that I forgave her because I deserved peace. I told her that the life we had was not a bad life. It was a life that belonged to 2 different people who never told each other what they wanted. I told her that I have stopped reading in front of women. I told her that I have started reading to myself. I told her that I have bought a dog. A rescue from the shelter in Evanston. A black lab mix named Arthur, after the man who called me on a Tuesday in October to ask if I was okay. I told her that Arthur sleeps on the rug in the kitchen and that I have decided to keep him there. I told her that I was sorry I had not heard her when she said the word later. I told her that there is no later. There is only now. She did not write back. That is okay. I did not write the letter for her to write back. I wrote the letter for me. I wrote it because I had to put the words on paper before I could let them go, and once I had let them go I discovered, as I think we all discover eventually, that the words weren't really about her. They were about me. They were about the version of me that had been sitting in the corner reading in front of her for 12 years, deaf to the sound of her turning toward him and turning away again and finally, quietly, opening the door and walking out. 2 weeks after I mailed the letter, a package arrived from Lisbon. Postage alone cost €48. The package was wrapped in brown paper, tied with a thin twine Camille had bought years ago at a market in Porto. I did not open the package that day. I set it on the kitchen counter. I made coffee. I read the paper. I let Arthur out into the backyard. I let Arthur back in. I made lunch. I made dinner. I washed the dishes by hand. I did not open the package. I opened it the next morning, at 6 a.m., when the house was still dark and the dog was still asleep and the only light in the kitchen was the small reading lamp Camille had once wanted me to throw away. Inside the package were 3 things. The first was the bench. The blue bench. The bench she had painted in 2014 and signed at the bottom, CH 2014. The bench had been disassembled. The slats were wrapped in old newspaper. The legs were tied together with the same Porto twine. There was a handwritten note taped to one of the slats that said, "I promised I would finish this. I never did. You should finish it. Or you should burn it. Either way, it is yours." The second thing was a small wooden box, the kind of box you would find in an antique store in the Berkshires, with a hinged lid and a brass clasp. Inside the box were 43 items. Each item was a note. Each note had a date on it. Each note was a sentence Camille had written about our marriage, in her slanted handwriting, on whatever paper was nearest, receipts, napkins, the back of an envelope, a hotel stationery from Lisbon. The dates ranged from January 2014, the month we moved into Forest Avenue, to July of this year, the month before she left. The notes were not, in the way I had feared, an indictment. The notes were a confession. They were a confession written by a woman who had not yet decided to confess. I read each note. I read them twice. I read them 3 times. I put them back in the box. I put the box on the shelf above the kitchen table, next to the coffee grinder. I have not read them since. I will not read them again. They are not for me to read again. They are for her to have written and for me to have received, and that, as Joan would say, is enough. The third thing in the package was a photograph. The photograph was of me. It was taken in 2019, on the front porch of Forest Avenue, on the morning after my mother died. Camille had taken the photograph from inside the doorway, through the screen. In the photograph I was sitting on the swing. I was holding a cup of coffee. I was looking at the front yard. My eyes were red. I did not know the photograph had been taken. I do not know why she had taken it. I do not know why she had kept it. I do not know why she had sent it to me, 11 months later, from a city in which she had decided to live without me. I have placed the photograph in the study, on the desk, in a frame I bought from a man named Otto who runs a small frame shop on Hirsch Street in Wilmette. Otto is 74. He was the same man who had framed the wedding photograph in the upstairs hallway. He did not recognize me when I walked in. He said, "Sir, what can I do for you?" I said, "I would like this photograph framed, please." He said, "Of course. Who is it?" I said, "It is me, sir." He said, "I am very sorry. I didn't recognize you. You look tired." I said, "Yes, sir. I am." He said, "Good. Tired is honest. I will not tell you what was on the back of the photograph. The back of the photograph was for Camille, and it is not mine to share. What I will tell you is that I have hung the photograph in the study, on the wall, behind the desk, where I can see it when I am working and when I am not working and when I am simply sitting in the chair, in the dark, in the room where my grandfather used to read the paper and where my mother used to write letters and where Camille used to file her nails and where I used to think I was doing the work of being a husband. I am not doing that work anymore. I am doing the work of being a man. It is different work. It is harder work. It is work that does not have a 1908 kitchen at the end of it, or a woman across the table, or a list of 40 items that we will never get through. It is work that has only Arthur at the end of it, and Arthur sleeps, and the dog does not need me to be a husband. The dog needs me to be present. And I am, finally, present. I am not the same man I was on that Tuesday in October. I am also not the man the before Tuesday version would have wanted to be. I am a third thing. A third man, made out of the wreckage of the first two. A man who has learned that being left is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Being left while you were sitting in the same room is the worst thing that can happen to you. Being left while you were reading, working, building, signing, sleeping, planning, scheming, calling, transferring, hiring, firing, negotiating, eating, drinking, breathing, being left while you were doing all of those things inside the same 5-foot radius as another human being and never once looking up long enough to notice that she was no longer there, that is the worst thing that can happen to you. And I have decided that the worst thing is survivable. What I have decided, more specifically, is this. Quiet is not strength. Quiet is avoidance. Routines are not connection. Routines are anesthesia. Being a good provider is not the same as being a good partner. Forgiving is not the same as forgetting. Letting go is not the same as giving up. And a man who has been left by someone he loved is not, in fact, a man who has been abandoned. He is a man who has been rebodied. He has been given new hands, new eyes, a new pair of ears that he didn't have on the Tuesday in October. He has been given the chance to be a different kind of man in a different kind of house with a different kind of dog and a different kind of silence, a silence he has chosen this time, instead of one he has fallen asleep inside. Arthur, the dog, is asleep right now at my feet. He sleeps on the rug in the kitchen, under the table where my grandmother ate her breakfasts and my grandfather ate his lunches and Camille ate her dinners and I ate my breakfasts, lunches, and dinners without ever looking up. He sleeps on a rug I bought him from a place called the Old Weavers, which is a small shop on Elm Street in Winnetka that has been there since 1971 and that almost nobody under 60 knows about. The rug is wool. It is dark blue. It is the color of the lake in winter when the sky is the same color as the water and you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. I am writing this at the same table. I am writing this without Camille across from me. I am writing this without a deal in front of me. I am writing this without a phone in front of me. I am writing this because a man in Winnetka called me 8 months ago and asked me if I was okay, and the answer was no, and the answer is now yes, and the answer will keep being yes for as long as I keep sitting in this kitchen with the door closed and the wreath on it and the windows open and the dog asleep and the lake out there doing what the lake does in summer, throwing the light back at anyone who bothers to look up. I have one more thing to say. Camille called me in June. 3 weeks ago. She called from Lisbon. The number came up on my phone with the country code and I let it ring 3 times and then I picked it up. Daniel, she said. Camille, I said. I got the letter, she said. I know, I said. I've been carrying it around in my bag for 2 months. I read it every morning. That's good, I said. I'm sorry, Daniel. I know. I'm sorry for the house. I'm sorry for the photographs. I'm sorry for your grandfather's kitchen. I'm sorry for Arthur Penbrook. I'm sorry I took your name off every photograph on the mantel. I know. Are you okay? I'm okay, Camille. Okay, she said. Okay, I said. And that was that. We didn't talk about reconciliation. We didn't talk about Lisbon. We didn't talk about the dog or the letter or the house or the Helic or the 12 years. We didn't talk about any of it. She said, take care of yourself, Daniel. I said, you too, Camille. She said, I love you. The old way. I said, I love you. The new way. I don't know what the new way is yet. I will figure it out. The way you figure out anything. By walking. By cooking. By reading at night to a dog who doesn't understand English but who likes the sound of my voice and who has decided, after 8 months, that I am his person and that his place is on the rug in the kitchen and that his job is to be there when I come home. By writing. By writing this. By writing it down so that on some Tuesday in October, when a man in Winnetka calls to ask if I am okay, the answer that comes out of my mouth is different from the answer that came out of my mouth last year. The answer is not no. The answer is yes. The answer is yes, and thank you for calling. That is the story. A story about a house. A story about a kitchen. A story about a woman who left and a dog who stayed and a brother who wanted to kill her and didn't and a mother who said, come for dinner, and meant it. A story about a forged signature and a stranded flight and a wreath that is still on the front door. A story about a man who did not cry on the sidewalk in Winnetka and did not cry in his office and did not cry on an airplane across the Atlantic and did, eventually, cry on an airplane across the Atlantic, but only because he was reading a novel about a man who had done the thing he had done and had come out the other side of it. A story that began with a phone call on a Tuesday and a 847 area code and a man who said, "Are you okay, Mr. Holden?" And a man who said, "No. But thank you for calling." That is the story. And if it is not the story of courage, that is okay. If it is not the story of revenge, that is okay. If it is not the story of love, that is okay. It is the story of a man who discovered, 8 months too late, that the woman he had married was not the woman he had been sleeping next to. That the woman he had been sleeping next to was a stranger. That she had always been a stranger. That the only reason she had not been a stranger before was that he had not looked up long enough to notice. And that is the thing I want to leave you with tonight. If you are sitting in a room right now and the person across from you has stopped talking, that is not silence. That is the loudest sound a marriage can make. If you are sitting in a room right now and the person across from you has stopped trying, you do not have to wait for the 847 area code to find out what is happening. You can look up. You can ask. You can put the book down. You can choose other than later. Drop a comment below. Has anyone you know ever been the buyer in someone else's divorce? Has anyone you know ever opened a door in a house he thought was his and found a stranger standing in the kitchen asking if he was okay? If this hit you, subscribe because we tell the kind of stories here that don't show up on the news and don't show up on Instagram and don't show up on the front page of the Chicago Tribune. They show up in the kitchen. They show up at the table. They show up on the rug, where a black lab mix named Arthur is sleeping right now between my feet and the wood floor of a 1908 kitchen in a house on Forest Avenue in Winnetka. We are just getting started. Good night. I want to leave you with one more thing tonight. It has been 10 months since the Tuesday of the call. It has been 10 months since Arthur Penbrook asked me, from a house that was no longer mine, if I was okay. It has been 10 months since my wife packed 3 suitcases in a townhouse on Pearson Street and left without saying goodbye, and it has been 10 months since I have learned the most important thing I have ever learned about being married, which is that the most important thing about being married is not the marriage. The most important thing about being married is the showing up. The sitting down. The looking up. The saying out loud, at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, in a kitchen that has not changed since 1908, I am here, and I am not reading, and I am not working, and I am not pretending that I am a different man than I was this morning, and I am here, Camille, and I am here, and I am here, and I am not going to say later. I am going to say now. I am going to say it now. I did not say that when I should have. I said it 10 months too late. But I am saying it now. I am saying it now because there is a man or a woman listening to this tonight who is sitting in a kitchen with their phone in their hand and a closed door on the other side of the house and a feeling in their chest that they cannot name. I am saying it now because the feeling has a name. The feeling is the feeling of a man or a woman who has lived in someone else's house so long that they have forgotten the layout of their own. The feeling is the feeling of a man or a woman who has been left while they were sitting in the same room as the person who was leaving. The feeling is the feeling of a man or a woman who has read the same closing documents 4 times in a kitchen on Lakeshore Drive and has not eaten since breakfast and has not cried since Sunday and has not laughed in 3 days. I am saying it now because the only cure for that feeling is not revenge, and it is not money, and it is not a 1908 kitchen, and it is not a dog named Arthur, although those things help. The only cure for that feeling is the next sentence. The next sentence is the one you say out loud. The next sentence is the one you say to the person across the table, or to the person across the country, or to the person across the years, or to the dog at your feet, or to the man in Winnetka who called you on a Tuesday to ask if you were okay. The next sentence is yours. The next sentence is yours to write. And the only person who can write it is you. Good night. We are still getting started.